A waitress, a mafia king, one reckless lie that changed everything. When Lydia Hayes was publicly humiliated at an elite wedding, the last person she expected to defend her was Victor Kane, the most feared man in the city. His claim was simple, brutal, and impossible. "She's my wife." The room went silent. The aristocrats froze, and Lydia's life shattered into 1,000 pieces she'd never put back together the same way again. This is their story, a contract written in desperation, a rule designed to prevent the one thing neither could control and the moment everything fell apart. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Grand Ashford Hotel didn't just host weddings, it consumed them. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from vaulted ceilings, throwing fractured light across marble floors so polished you could see your failures reflected back at you. The kind of place where the flower arrangements cost more than Lydia's rent, where the guests wore watches worth more than her car, if she'd owned a car. Lydia Hayes moved through the reception hall like a ghost, her white serving shirt already clinging to her back despite the aggressive air conditioning. She'd been working since 6 that morning, setting up chairs, polishing silverware, arranging place cards for people whose names she couldn't pronounce. Now, 4 hours into the reception, her feet screamed inside the cheap flats she'd bought specifically because they were black and didn't have visible holes. "More champagne, table 7, Marcus hissed as he swept past her, his serving tray perfectly balanced. He'd been doing this for years, moved with the kind of invisible efficiency that rich people paid for without ever noticing. Lydia grabbed a fresh bottle from the service station, her hand steady despite the exhaustion creeping up her spine. She'd gotten good at this. The smile, the posture, the way of existing in a room without actually being seen. It was a survival skill she'd developed over 2 years of catering gigs, weddings, and corporate events, and charity galas where people donated more in one evening than she'd make in 6 months. Table 7 was positioned near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Old money, from the look of them, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. The women wore jewelry that seemed deliberately understated until you noticed the clarity of the diamonds, the depth of the emeralds. The men had that particular haircut that cost $300 but looked like they'd just rolled out of bed. "Finally," one of the women said as Lydia approached, not looking up from her phone. "We've been waiting for ages." Lydia had refilled their champagne 11 minutes ago. She knew because she'd checked the time, using the small acts of service as mile markers through the endless evening. "My apologies," she said, voice pleasant and empty. She poured carefully, the champagne forming perfect columns of tiny bubbles. "Is there anything else I can—" "That's all," the woman said, waving her hand dismissively. Lydia stepped back, turning toward the kitchen when she saw him for the first time. Victor Kane stood in the center of the room like gravity had shifted in his direction. People didn't crowd around him. They orbited, maintaining careful distance, their body language a complex map of desire and fear. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her mother's medical bills, his dark hair pushed back from a face that could have been carved from something harder than marble. Handsome in the way that made you forget to breathe, dangerous in the way that made you remember why you should. She knew who he was. Everyone did. Victor Kane wasn't exactly a public figure, but his name moved through the city like smoke, attaching itself to the kinds of stories people told in lowered voices. Real estate, they said. Import-export, investments. All the polite words that meant something else entirely. Lydia had seen his photo in the paper once, standing in the background of some charity event. The caption had called him a prominent businessman and philanthropist. The comments section had told a different story. She looked away quickly, years of invisibility training kicking in. Don't stare at the guests. Don't make eye contact unless they initiate it. Don't exist any more than absolutely necessary. The evening ground forward. Lydia's feet went from hurting to numb, which she counted as progress. She delivered champagne and cleared plates and smiled until her face ached. Around 9, the bride and groom cut a cake the size of a small car, and everyone applauded like they'd accomplished something meaningful. It was during the dancing that everything fell apart. Lydia was collecting empty glasses from a table near the bar when someone grabbed her arm. The grip was hard enough to hurt, fingers digging into the soft part of her bicep. "You," a man slurred, his breath a fog of expensive whiskey. You're that waitress from earlier. She recognized him vaguely. Table 12, third seat from the left. He'd been drunk 2 hours ago, was substantially worse now. Mid-40s, thinning hair, the kind of face that looked like it had never been told no. Yes, sir, Lydia said carefully, trying to extract her arm without being obvious about it. Can I help you with something? You ignored me, he said, louder now. A few nearby guests glanced over, their conversations faltering. I asked for a drink and you walked right past. Lydia's mind raced back through the evening. She'd served table 12 at least 6 times, hadn't received any requests she'd missed. But that didn't matter. The customer was always right, even when they were drunk and wrong and looking for someone to punish. I apologize if there was any confusion, she said, using her most practiced service voice. I'd be happy to get you a drink now. Confusion. He laughed, sharp and mean. You people are all the same. Think you can just ignore us, show up in our spaces. Sir, I really think we should. Don't interrupt me. His grip tightened. Do you know who I am? My family has been in this city for 6 generations. 6. And you're what? Some trashy nobody who can't even do her job right? The room wasn't silent yet, but it was getting there. Conversations died in spreading circles, heads turning toward the spectacle. Lydia felt heat crawling up her neck, that particular shame that came from being humiliated in front of dozens of people who already thought you were less than them. Please let go of my arm, she said quietly. I'll let go when I'm done talking. He swayed slightly, his face too close to hers. You know what your problem is? You don't know your place. Coming here, serving us, acting like you belong, that's enough, Richard. The voice cut through the room like a blade. Cold, precise, carrying the kind of authority that made even drunk aristocrats pause. Victor Kane stood 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, expression absolutely neutral. He looked at Richard the way you might look at a stain on expensive carpet, mildly annoying, easily removed. This doesn't concern you, Kane, Richard said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. I'm making it my concern. Victor's eyes moved to where Richard's hand gripped Lydia's arm. Let her go. Since when do you care about the help? Since now. Victor stepped closer, and something in the movement made Richard's hand drop away from Lydia's arm like she'd caught fire. Apologize to her. Richard's face went through several colors. You can't be serious. I rarely joke. The entire ballroom had gone quiet now. Lydia stood frozen, trapped in the middle of whatever power play this was, feeling like a mouse that had wandered between 2 predators comparing territory. Richard looked around, perhaps hoping for support, finding only carefully neutral faces, people watching, saying nothing. Finally, his shoulders slumped. Fine. Sorry, whatever. He turned to leave, but Victor's voice stopped him cold. Not good enough. What? A proper apology, to her face, now. Richard's jaw clenched so hard Lydia could see the muscles jumping. He turned back to her, wouldn't quite meet her eyes. I apologize for my behavior. It was inappropriate. The words came out like broken glass. Victor waited a beat, then nodded once. Better. Now leave. Richard left, moving quickly despite his drunken stumble, disappearing into the crowd that parted for him like water. Lydia stood perfectly still, aware of dozens of eyes on her, aware that whatever had just happened was far from over. She should thank him, should say something polite and professional, and then disappear into the kitchen before this got any worse. But when she opened her mouth, Victor spoke first. Are you all right? The question surprised her. She'd expected dismissal, maybe some command to get back to work, not concern. I'm fine, she said automatically. Thank you for... Actually, Victor interrupted, his voice carrying across the silent room, there's something I should clarify. He turned to face the crowd, and Lydia's stomach dropped because she recognized that shift in his posture. Whatever came next, it was for the audience, not for her. Richard was wrong about several things, Victor said, his tone conversational but somehow filling the entire space. But his biggest mistake was not knowing who he was talking to. Lydia's confusion must have shown on her face because Victor looked at her then, and something in his expression made her blood run cold. Not angry, not cruel, just absolutely certain. This, he said clearly, is my wife. The room exploded into whispers. Lydia's brain stopped working. Wife. He'd said wife. She opened her mouth to correct him, to laugh it off as some kind of joke. But Victor was still looking at her with those dark eyes that promised consequences if she contradicted him now. I prefer to keep my private life private, Victor continued, addressing the room again. But it seems some clarification is necessary. So yes, Lydia is my wife, and I'd appreciate it if everyone here treated her with the respect that entails. He said it like he was commenting on the weather, like he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of an elite wedding. Like claiming a complete stranger as his wife was a perfectly reasonable response to a drunk aristocrat's tantrum. The whispers got louder. Phones came out. Someone near the back actually gasped. Lydia stood frozen, her mind screaming that she needed to say something, correct this, but the words wouldn't come. Victor had turned back to her, offering his arm like a gentleman from some period drama. "Shall we?" he said quietly. It wasn't really a question. Lydia took his arm because the alternative was standing there while hundreds of people stared at her, while phones recorded this moment that would probably be all over social media within the hour. His arm was solid under her hand, the fabric of his suit expensive enough that she was afraid to grip too hard. They walked through the ballroom together, the crowd parting, whispers following them like a wake. Lydia kept her eyes forward, her service smile locked in place, even though inside she was screaming. What the hell had just happened? Victor led her through a side door she hadn't even noticed, down a hallway lined with expensive art, into what looked like a private office. He closed the door, and suddenly the noise of the party was gone, replaced by suffocating silence. Lydia pulled her arm free, stepped back, tried to find her voice. "What?" she finally managed. "Was that?" Victor moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "An impulse." "An impulse?" she laughed, high and slightly hysterical. "You just told everyone in there that I'm your wife because of an impulse? Richard Arlington is a waste of oxygen with too much inherited money and a persecution complex. He needed to be put in his place." Victor's voice was calm, academic. "This seemed efficient." "Efficient," Lydia repeated. "You do understand that half those people probably have their phones out already, right? That this is going to be everywhere by morning?" "I know." "And you did it anyway?" "Yes." Lydia pressed her hands against her eyes, trying to think. Her arms still hurt where Richard had grabbed her. Her feet still ached. And now she was somehow married to the most dangerous man in the city, according to several hundred witnesses. "I'm going to go back out there," she said slowly, "and tell everyone this was a misunderstanding, that you misspoke or I misheard or that would be a mistake." Something in his tone made her stop. Victor turned from the window, and in the low light of the office, she could see him more clearly. Handsome, yes, but there was something else there. Something in the way he held himself, the careful control of every movement. "Why?" she asked. "Because I don't make mistakes. Not in public." He tilted his head slightly. "If you contradict me now, it makes me look like a liar. And people who make me look like a liar tend to have unfortunate accidents." The threat was delivered without heat, just a statement of fact. Lydia felt her pulse kick up. "So what? I'm just supposed to go along with this? Pretend to be your wife?" "For now, yes." "For how long?" "I'll let you know." This was insane. This was actually insane. Lydia looked at the door, calculated how fast she could get to it, whether hotel security would stop her if she ran. But even as she thought it, she knew it was pointless. Victor Kane had just claimed her in front of hundreds of people. Where exactly was she supposed to run? "I have a job," she said instead. "A life. You can't just—" "How much do you make?" The question threw her. "What?" "Your job. How much do you make?" "I don't see how that's—" "Humor me." Lydia's jaw clenched. "Depends on the event. Average maybe $2,000 a month, with tips." Victor pulled out his phone, tapped something, then looked back at her. "What's your bank account number?" "Excuse me?" "Your bank account, where you deposit your paychecks." "Why would I tell you that?" He sighed like she was being difficult. "Because I'm going to transfer $50,000 into it, and I need to know where to send it." Lydia's brain short-circuited. 50... what? "Consider it a signing bonus for your cooperation." "I'm not cooperating with anything." Her voice came out louder than intended. She lowered it, tried to find some solid ground in this conversation. "You can't just throw money at people and expect them to go along with whatever insane plan." $75,000. What? You're negotiating. That's smart. Victor's expression didn't change. $75,000 transferred tonight, plus a reasonable monthly stipend for the duration of our arrangement. In exchange, you play the role of my wife when required. Lydia stared at him. You're serious? I rarely joke. $75,000. Lydia did the math automatically. Years of financial desperation, making the numbers flash through her head faster than conscious thought. That was her student loans. That was her mother's physical therapy. That was 6 months of rent paid in advance, car repairs, the broken tooth she'd been ignoring because the dentist was too expensive. Why? She asked. Why what? Why me? You could have anyone. Why claim some random waitress as your wife? Victor was quiet for a moment, and Lydia got the sense he was actually considering the question. Honestly? I don't know. Richard was being intolerable. You looked like you wanted to vanish into the floor, and the thought occurred to me that claiming you would solve multiple problems simultaneously. What problems? Mine. He checked his phone again. It's nearly 10. I have a meeting at midnight. I need an answer. Lydia's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, tried to think clearly. This was crazy. Dangerous. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get as far from Victor Kane as physically possible. But $75,000. If I say no? She asked quietly. Then you say no. I'll smooth things over with the wedding guests, create some explanation. You'll go back to your life. He paused. But the money goes away. Of course it did. Lydia laughed, bitter and sharp. So it's blackmail. It's an offer. With a gun to my head. I'm not holding a gun. Victor's voice was maddeningly calm. I'm offering you a choice. A difficult one, perhaps, but a choice nonetheless. Lydia looked at him, really looked at him, tried to see past the expensive suit and the controlled expression to whatever was underneath. She found nothing. He was a wall, smooth and impenetrable. What exactly would this arrangement entail? She asked. Occasional public appearances? Charity events, business dinners, situations where having a wife is advantageous. You'd need to be convincing, affectionate but not overly so, comfortable in high-pressure social situations. I'm a waitress, not an actress. You'll learn. I'll provide coaching if necessary. And privately? Privately, we maintain appropriate distance. Separate residences, separate lives. This is business, nothing more. Business? Right. Lydia pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to ease the headache building there. How long? 6 months, minimum. A year at most. After that, we'll arrange a quiet divorce. Irreconcilable differences. Very amicable, very boring. And if I want out before then you forfeit the money and deal with whatever social fallout occurs. His eyes didn't leave hers. I should be clear, breaking this arrangement prematurely would be inadvisable. I protect my reputation, Lydia, aggressively. There was the threat, wrapped in polite words. Lydia felt it settle in her chest like a stone. She thought about her apartment, the leak in the bathroom she couldn't afford to fix, her mother declining in that terrible slow way, needing care Lydia couldn't provide. The collection notices piling up, the careful mathematics of poverty she performed every time she bought groceries. $75,000. I need it in writing, she heard herself say. A contract, specific terms, exit clauses, everything official. Victor almost smiled. Of course. My lawyer will have something drafted by morning. And I want 100,000. Now he did smile, small and sharp. 90. 95. Done. He pulled out his phone again. Bank account? Lydia gave him the numbers, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. She watched him type, hit send, then turned the screen toward her. A transaction confirmation for $95,000. Half now, he said. Half when you sign the contract tomorrow. The money was real. In her account. Lydia felt dizzy. There are going to be questions, she said, grasping for something practical to focus on. About who I am, where we met, how long we've been together. We met at a charity gala 8 months ago. You were working as an event coordinator. We kept our relationship private because I value discretion. The marriage itself was a small ceremony, very intimate, just last month. He recited it like he'd already memorized the script. I'll send you a full background document. Memorize it. Event coordinator, Lydia repeated, not waitress. No one wants to hear that I married the help, even if it's temporarily true. The casual cruelty of that statement should have hurt more than it did. Instead, Lydia just felt numb. I should go, she said. My shift isn't technically over, and your shift is over. I'll handle it with the catering manager. Victor straightened his cuffs, a gesture so unconscious it seemed automatic. I'll have a car pick you up tomorrow at 10. Bring identification and any questions you have for the lawyer. Where? I'll text you. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. What? The arm. Where Richard grabbed you, is it injured? Lydia touched it automatically. It would bruise, but nothing serious. I'm fine. Victor nodded once, then left, the door closing softly behind him. Lydia stood alone in the office, her phone heavy in her pocket, $95,000 sitting in her bank account like a bomb waiting to detonate. She'd just agreed to marry a mafia boss. The thought came with a weird laugh that might have been the beginning of hysteria. She pressed her hands against her mouth, breathing carefully through her nose until the panic receded. Tomorrow. She'd figure this out tomorrow. Right now, she needed to get home before her brain fully processed what she'd done. Thus, the apartment was exactly as terrible as she'd left it that morning. Lydia let herself in, locked the 3 separate locks Marcus had helped her install after the break-in 2 months ago, and stood in the dark for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and checked her bank account. $95,000. It was still there. Real. Impossible. Lydia sat down on her secondhand couch, rescued from a curb 3 years ago, stained but functional, and started laughing. The kind of laugh that hurt, that came from somewhere deep and broke on the way up. She'd sold herself to Victor Kane for less than the cost of his watch. And the worst part? She'd do it again. Right now, knowing everything she knew, she'd make the same choice. Because $95,000 was more money than she'd ever had. More money than she'd probably ever have again. It was survival compressed into a number. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Car will arrive at 9:45 a.m., dress professionally. VK. Lydia stared at the message. VK Victor Kane. Her husband, according to several hundred witnesses and whatever gossip was already spreading through the city's social circles. She should sleep, should try to rest before tomorrow and whatever fresh nightmare it brought. Instead, she opened her banking app again, looked at the number until her eyes burned. Then she transferred $5,000 to her mother's care facility. The payment went through instantly. 6 months of physical therapy paid in full. Lydia set down her phone and cried, hard and messy, until she had nothing left. The car that arrived at 9:45 was sleek and black and probably cost more than her entire building. The driver didn't speak, just opened the door and waited while Lydia climbed into leather seats that smelled like money. She'd worn the only professional outfit she owned, black slacks from Target, a white blouse that had survived 3 years of careful washing. Her shoes were the same cheap flats from the wedding, cleaned as best as she could manage. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror. Mr. Kane wanted me to inform you that we're making one additional stop. Where? You'll see. They pulled up in front of a boutique in the kind of neighborhood where even the air felt expensive. A woman in a perfectly tailored suit stood outside, checking her phone. Ms. Hayes, she said as Lydia climbed out. I'm Margot. Mr. Kane asked me to assist you with wardrobe. Wardrobe? For today's meeting and future appearances, he was very specific about his requirements. Margot's smile was professional and completely cold. We have 40 minutes. Let's not waste them. The next 40 minutes passed in a blur of fabric and judgment. Margot moved through the boutique like a general commanding troops, pulling pieces Lydia would never have touched, dismissing her protests with practiced efficiency. This is too much, Lydia said, looking at the pile of clothes that kept growing. Dresses, suits, shoes, accessories that probably cost more than her rent. Mr. Kane was very clear. You're his wife now. You need to look the part. Margot held up a navy dress, assessing. This, for today, simple, elegant, appropriate for meeting lawyers. Lydia changed in the dressing room, staring at herself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, hugging without being obvious about it. She looked different, expensive. She looked like someone Victor Kane might actually marry. Better, Margot said when she emerged. Shoes next. By the time they finished, Lydia was wearing an outfit that cost more than she made in a month, carrying bags that contained enough clothes to fill her closet twice over. "Mr. Kane has an account," Margot said when Lydia tried to protest. "Everything's handled. The driver will take you to the lawyer now." Back in the car, dressed like someone else, Lydia felt reality starting to fracture around the edges. This couldn't be her life. This couldn't be real. But the clothes were real. The leather seats were real. And the building they pulled up to, all glass and steel, the kind of place where law firms charged by the minute, was definitely real. The driver opened her door. "17th floor, Mr. Kane is already upstairs." Lydia took the elevator, her new shoes silent on polished marble. The law firm's reception area looked like a museum, all modern art and uncomfortable furniture that cost thousands per piece. "Ms. Hayes," the receptionist said before Lydia could introduce herself. "Conference room B, right this way." Victor was sitting at a massive table, reading something on a tablet, a cup of coffee at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, his gaze taking in the new clothes without comment. "Margot came through," was all he said. "Good, sit." Lydia sat. A moment later, a man in an expensive suit entered, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Lydia's car would have if she'd owned one. "James Morrison," he said, shaking her hand. His grip was firm, professional. "I'll be handling the contractual arrangements for your marriage." Marriage. The word still felt wrong in her mouth. "Let's begin," Victor said. What followed was 90 minutes of the most surreal legal discussion Lydia had ever experienced. James walked through the contract with practiced precision, explaining terms and clauses while Lydia's head spun. 6-month minimum term, renewable up to 12 months by mutual agreement, monthly stipend of $15,000. Separate residences, with provisions for occasional cohabitation during extended public events. Non-disclosure agreements that would survive the marriage's dissolution. Fidelity clauses that applied in public only. What they did in private was apparently their own business, as long as it was discreet. And this section, James said, sliding a page across the table, covers termination. Lydia read it carefully. Either party could end the arrangement with 30 days' notice, but early termination meant forfeiting the financial settlement. The only exception was if either party violated specific terms, public affairs, criminal charges, actions that brought demonstrable reputational harm to the other. "What counts as demonstrable reputational harm?" she asked. "Whatever a judge decides counts," James said. "It's intentionally vague, protects both parties." "Or protects him," Lydia said, looking at Victor. "Since he's the one with lawyers and money." "True," Victor said, "but you're the one with nothing to lose. I'd argue that makes you more dangerous." James cleared his throat. "There's also this." He slid another document across the table. "Mr. Kane has agreed to cover any outstanding debts you currently carry, up to $200,000. This is separate from the settlement and doesn't count against the termination clause." Lydia's head snapped up. "What?" "Your student loans, medical bills, credit cards, whatever you owe." Victor's expression didn't change. "Consider it an investment in making sure you can focus on this arrangement without distraction." I can't." Lydia's throat closed up. $200,000. That was everything. Every piece of debt that had been crushing her for years. "You can," Victor said simply. "And you will. James needs your creditor information by end of business today." Lydia looked between them, these two men in their expensive suits, calmly discussing erasing her entire financial existence like it was nothing. "Why?" she asked. "You're already paying me. Why this too?" "Because I need you focused. Debt makes people desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." Victor leaned back in his chair. "This way, you're comfortable, taken care of, free to play your role without worrying about bill collectors." It made sense in a cold, calculated way. It also made her feel like she was being bought, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of her that wasn't owned by him. "One more thing," James said. "The marriage itself, we've prepared all the necessary documentation. You'll need to go to City Hall tomorrow and make it legal." Lydia blinked. "Wait, we're not actually married?" "Not yet," Victor said. "Last night was theater. Tomorrow is paperwork." "But everyone thinks what we want them to think. But if we're going to make this work, it needs to be legal. Otherwise, it falls apart the moment someone checks public records." "So I have to actually marry you?" "Yes." Lydia sat back, processing. Somehow, in all of this insanity, she'd missed that detail. The actual marriage, legal and binding and real. If you're having second thoughts, James said carefully, now would be the time. Lydia looked at the contract in front of her, thought about the $95,000 already in her account, the $200,000 in debts about to vanish, the monthly stipend that would let her breathe for the first time in years. She thought about her mother, asking if Lydia was eating enough, pretending not to notice that her daughter had gotten thinner, more worn down, about the apartment with the leaking bathroom, about the careful mathematics of survival she performed every single day. She picked up the pen James offered. Where do I sign? They went to City Hall at 10 the next morning. Lydia wore another outfit from Margot's collection, simple and elegant in a way that felt like armor. Victor was in another suit, this one charcoal gray, checking his phone while they waited for their appointment. The ceremony took 11 minutes. A board clerk read through the legal requirements while Lydia and Victor stood side by side, not touching. When it came time to exchange rings, Victor produced 2 platinum bands that probably cost more than a semester of college. He slid one onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Lydia put the other on his hand, her fingers shaking slightly. By the power vested in me by the state, the clerk droned, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss if you'd like. We're good, Victor said. The clerk shrugged, had them sign the certificate, and that was it. Married, Lydia Kane now, apparently, walked out of City Hall as someone's wife. Victor's wife. The whole thing felt like a fever dream. Lunch, Victor said, checking his phone again. There's a place nearby. We should be seen together. Start establishing the narrative. Of course, it was always performance, always calculated. They ate at a restaurant where the menu didn't have prices, and the waiters moved like dancers. Victor ordered for both of them, somehow knowing she was allergic to shellfish, that she preferred white wine to red. Details he must have researched, filed away for moments exactly like this. You're very good at this, Lydia said, cutting into something that tasted like it cost $100 per bite. At what? Performing. Pretending. Victor looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. I've had a lot of practice. At being married? At being whatever the situation requires. A photographer was definitely watching them from across the street. Lydia had spotted him within 5 minutes of arriving, his camera barely concealed. Victor had noticed too, she was sure, but he didn't react. Just continued the performance of being a newlywed couple having lunch. Tell me something true, Lydia said suddenly. Victor raised an eyebrow. What? Something real. Not part of the script James wrote, just something true about you. He was quiet for a long moment, and Lydia thought he might refuse. Then he set down his fork. I don't like crowds, he said. Never have. All those people, all that noise, it's overwhelming. But my father used to say that power requires presence, so I learned to tolerate it. He picked up his wine glass. Every crowded room still feels like suffocating, though. Even now. It was such a small thing, such a human admission. It made him feel real for the first time since this whole nightmare started. My turn? Lydia asked. If you'd like. I'm terrified, she said quietly, of all of this. Of you. Of what happens if I screw this up. That's honest. You asked for true. She met his eyes. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to reveal what you really want from this, because nobody gives away this much money without wanting something in return. Maybe I'm exactly what I appear to be, Victor said. Someone who needed a wife and found a convenient solution. Nobody's that simple. No, he agreed. They're not. The photographer got his shots. They finished lunch. Victor paid without looking at the check, and they left together, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Proprietary. Possessive. The kind of touch that said mine to everyone watching. In the car, that touch disappeared. I have a meeting this afternoon, Victor said, back to checking his phone. The driver will take you home. There's an event Friday night, a charity gala. Black tie. Margot will make sure you have something appropriate. What kind of charity? The kind where rich people give money so they can feel good about themselves. You'll smile, make polite conversation, and let me introduce you as my wife. He looked up from his phone. Think you can handle that? I've been handling drunk rich people for 2 years. I think I can manage a few hours of polite conversation. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe. Good. The car dropped her at her apartment building. Lydia climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her door, still wearing the expensive clothes, carrying bags from the boutique that would never fit in her tiny closet. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Same stained couch, same leaking bathroom, same evidence of a life lived on the margins. Except now she had a platinum ring on her finger and a contract that said she was married to the most dangerous man in the city. Lydia sat down on the couch and stared at her reflection in the dark TV screen. She didn't recognize herself, and somehow that felt like exactly the point. The gala was at the Meridian, which somehow made the Grand Ashford look modest. Lydia stood in front of her bathroom mirror, the one with the crack in the corner she'd been meaning to fix for 8 months, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Margot had outdone herself. The dress was midnight blue, cut to skim rather than cling, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. Lydia's hair had been professionally styled that afternoon by a woman who touched it like she was handling silk. Makeup applied by someone who charged $300 an hour and was apparently worth every penny. She looked like she belonged in Victor's world. The thought made her stomach twist. Her phone buzzed. Lydia grabbed the clutch Margot had provided, also midnight blue, also probably worth more than her monthly rent used to be, and headed down. The same black car waited at the curb, but this time Victor was inside. He looked up when she slid in beside him, his gaze traveling over her in one quick assessment. "Good," was all he said. Not beautiful, not stunning, just good, like she'd passed some kind of test. "Thanks," Lydia said dryly. "You clean up okay, too." That earned her the shadow of a smile. Victor wore a tuxedo that fit him like it had been designed specifically for his body, which it probably had. His hair was pushed back, revealing the sharp lines of his face, and Lydia caught herself staring before forcing her eyes away. This was business. Performance. She needed to remember that. "Ground rules," Victor said as the car pulled into traffic. "Stay close to me. Don't wander off alone. If someone asks you a direct question about our relationship, stick to the script we discussed." "Met at a charity gala, private ceremony, very much in love," Lydia recited. "I remember. There will be reporters, photographers, people trying to get you to say something interesting." His eyes found hers. "Don't give them anything." "What counts as anything? Anything that contradicts our narrative. Anything personal. Anything true." "Right. Nothing true." Lydia folded her hands in her lap, the platinum band catching the streetlights. She'd gotten used to its weight over the past 3 days, stopped flinching every time she noticed it. "What about your family?" she asked. "Are they going to be there?" Something shifted in Victor's expression, gone before she could identify it. "My father's dead. My mother lives in Europe, no siblings. So no family." The flatness in his voice suggested the topic was closed. Lydia filed it away with all the other things she was learning about him, the way he took his coffee, how he checked his phone compulsively, the careful control he maintained over every word and gesture. The Meridian's ballroom made the Grand Ashford look like a high school gym. Crystal and gold and marble, a ceiling that seemed to go up forever, flower arrangements the size of compact cars positioned every few feet, the kind of wealth that was so excessive it became abstract. Victor offered his arm as they entered. Lydia took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric, and tried not to think about how natural the gesture was becoming. Heads turned as they walked in. Whispers followed them like a wave. Lydia kept her expression neutral, pleasant, the same face she'd worn for 2 years of serving these people drinks. "Victor Kane," a voice boomed. A man in his 60s, red-faced and jovial, approached with a champagne flute in each hand. "And this must be the mysterious bride we've all been hearing about." "Robert," Victor said, shaking the man's hand. "This is my wife, Lydia. Lydia, Robert Hutchins. He owns half the real estate in the financial district." "Only a third," Robert said, laughing too loud. "Though I'm working on it." He turned to Lydia, his eyes doing that thing men's eyes did, assessing, calculating. "Lovely to meet you, my dear. You've caused quite a stir, you know. No one even knew Victor was dating anyone." "We preferred to keep things private," Lydia said, her voice smooth and empty. "Victor values his discretion." "Clearly." Robert leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I had money on him never settling down. You must be quite something special." "She is," Victor said, his hand finding the small of Lydia's back. The touch was light, possessive, exactly what a besotted husband's would be. "If you'll excuse us, Robert, I see the mayor." They moved through the crowd, Victor's hand never leaving her back. He introduced her to a state senator, 3 CEOs, a federal judge, and someone who apparently owned a professional sports team. Lydia smiled and made polite conversation and tried not to think about how many laws were probably being broken in this room at any given moment. "You're good at this," Victor murmured during a brief moment alone. "I told you. 2 years of catering. I know how rich people want to be talked to. It's more than that." His eyes scanned the room, always assessing, always calculating. "You adapt. Most people in your position would be nervous, making mistakes. You're playing the role perfectly. Maybe I'm a better actress than you thought. Maybe." He caught the eye of someone across the room, nodded slightly. "Or maybe you understand that survival requires performance." Before Lydia could respond, a woman in a silver dress appeared at Victor's elbow. Mid-40s, beautiful in that preserved way that came from expensive procedures and personal trainers. "Victor," she said, her voice carrying notes of familiarity that made Lydia's shoulders tense. "I heard the news, but I had to see it to believe it." "Catherine." Victor's tone cooled several degrees. "Lydia, this is Catherine Moreau. Catherine, my wife." Catherine's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Wife? How unexpected." Her eyes raked over Lydia, finding flaws and cataloging them. "You work in events, I hear." "Event coordination, yes," Lydia said, sticking to the script. "How interesting. I don't think I've seen you at any of the major firms." It wasn't quite a question, more an accusation wrapped in politeness. "I prefer smaller boutique operations," Lydia said smoothly, "more personal attention to detail." Catherine sipped her champagne. "And how did you two meet? I'm simply dying to know." Victor's hand tightened slightly on Lydia's back, a warning or reassurance she couldn't tell. "At the Riverside Gala last spring, Lydia was coordinating, I was bored, and she made the evening considerably less tedious." "Romantic," Catherine said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "Well, congratulations. I'm sure you'll be very happy together." She drifted away, but Lydia could feel her watching from across the room. "Ex-girlfriend?" Lydia asked quietly. "Something like that. She seems lovely." "She's a viper." Victor's voice was matter-of-fact, but a well-connected viper, so we maintain polite relations. The evening ground on. Lydia's feet started to hurt despite the expensive shoes. She drank champagne because it gave her something to do with her hands, ate tiny appetizers that tasted like money, and played the role of Victor Kane's wife with what she hoped was convincing enthusiasm. Around 10, they ended up on a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, a relief after the stuffy ballroom. Lydia leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights stretching to the horizon. "You can relax," Victor said from behind her. "No one's watching out here." Lydia straightened, suddenly aware that she'd let her posture slip. "How do you do this? The constant performance?" "Practice." He moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "After a while, you forget which parts are real." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." They stood in silence for a moment, the noise of the party muffled behind them. Lydia watched the city lights, thought about all the people down there living normal lives, working jobs, going home to apartments, worrying about normal things. She envied them. "Why do you do it?" she asked. "All of this. You have money, power. You could do anything. Why waste your time at parties like this?" Victor was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, "Because power requires maintenance. You can't just acquire it and walk away. It's like a garden. Neglect it, and the weeds take over." "That's a depressing metaphor." "It's an honest one." Lydia turned to look at him. In the low light, his face was all shadows and sharp angles. "Do you ever wish you could just walk away? Disappear somewhere nobody knows you?" "Every day," he said quietly. "But wishing doesn't change reality." Before Lydia could respond, her phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out, saw her mother's care facility number, and her stomach dropped. "I need to take this," she said, already moving away. "Sorry. Everything okay?" But Lydia was already answering, her heart pounding. "Hello? Miss Kane?" The voice was professional, calm. "This is Margaret from Riverside Care. I'm calling about your mother." "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's fine. There was a small incident during physical therapy, nothing serious, just a fall. But the doctor would like to adjust her treatment plan, and we need your authorization." Lydia's knees felt weak. "What kind of adjustment?" "Additional sessions, some new equipment. It will add approximately $2,000 a month to her care costs. I know that's significant, so if you need time to—" "Do it," Lydia said. "Whatever she needs, just do it." "Are you sure? I can send over the detailed breakdown." "I'm sure." Lydia closed her eyes. A month ago, $2,000 would have been impossible. Now, with the money from Victor, it was barely a consideration. "Just take care of her." "Of course. I'll have the paperwork ready for your signature." Lydia ended the call, her hand shaking slightly. When she turned around, Victor was watching her. "Your mother?" he asked. "How did you—" "You mentioned her care facility when James asked about your debts, I assumed." He moved closer. "Is she all right?" "Yeah, just needing more treatment." Lydia laughed, sharp and bitter. "Which I can actually afford now, thanks to you." That was the point of the arrangement. "I know. It's just weird. A week ago, I would have had to choose between her treatment and making rent. Now I'm standing on a balcony in a dress that costs more than my car would if I owned one, married to a man I barely know." "Do you regret it?" Lydia considered the question honestly. "I don't know yet. Ask me when this is over." Victor's expression shifted into something she couldn't read. "Fair enough." They went back inside. The party continued. More introductions, more performance, more careful lies wrapped in expensive fabric. Lydia played her role, smiled at the right moments, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Around midnight, Catherine reappeared, slightly drunk and considerably less polite. "Victor," she said, her voice carrying across the conversation circle they'd been trapped in. "I simply must know, how long has this whirlwind romance been going on?" "8 months," Victor said evenly. "As I mentioned earlier." Right. 8 months." Catherine smiled. "It's just so surprising. I mean, we were together for 3 years, and you never once mentioned marriage. But 8 months with—" She gestured vaguely at Lydia. "And suddenly you're ready to commit." The circle had gone quiet. Everyone watching, waiting to see how this would play out. "People change," Victor said, his voice dropping several degrees. "Perhaps I simply needed to meet the right person. Or perhaps," Catherine continued, apparently past caring about subtlety, "this is just another one of your business arrangements. I mean, let's be honest, a waitress suddenly married to Victor Kane? It strains credibility." The word waitress landed like a slap. Lydia felt every eye in the circle turn to her, saw the calculation happening behind expensive cosmetics and careful expressions. "Event coordinator," Lydia corrected, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. "And I'm sorry my profession doesn't meet your standards, Catherine. Not all of us had the luxury of marrying into our money." Catherine's face went red. "I earned my position by divorcing well?" Lydia smiled sweetly. "Yes, I heard. Quite an accomplishment." The silence that followed was absolute. Someone coughed. Catherine looked like she'd been struck. Victor's hand found Lydia's waist, pulling her close. "If you'll excuse us," he said to the group at large, "my wife and I should be going." They walked away, Victor's hand never leaving her waist. Lydia could feel the stares following them, hear the whispers starting up in their wake. "That was reckless," Victor said once they were out of earshot. "She called me a waitress in front of everyone. What was I supposed to do? Smile and take it?" "Yes." He guided her toward the exit. "That's exactly what you were supposed to do." "Well, I didn't." Lydia pulled away from his grip. "I'm not going to stand there and let some bitter ex-girlfriend humiliate me. Catherine Moreau is connected to half the social elite in this city. Making an enemy of her was stupid." "Then maybe you should have married someone who was better at playing nice with vipers." They'd reached the entrance. Victor's jaw was tight, his control clearly fraying. "Wait here. I'll get the car. I can get myself home." "You're angry, I understand that, but we're not doing this here." His eyes locked on hers. "Wait. Here." He left before she could argue. Lydia stood in the entrance hall, her heart pounding, aware of the stares from other guests leaving the party. She'd screwed up. She knew she'd screwed up. But Catherine's smug face, that casual cruelty in calling her a waitress. The car pulled up. Victor got out, opened her door without a word. Lydia climbed in, the silence between them heavy enough to suffocate. They were 5 blocks from the Meridian when Victor finally spoke. That can't happen again. What? Me defending myself? You defending yourself by confirming every suspicion people have about this marriage. He stared out the window, his profile sharp in the passing streetlights. Catherine was baiting you. She wanted a reaction, and you gave her exactly what she wanted. So I'm just supposed to smile while people insult me? Yes, because that's the job. He turned to look at her. You think I enjoy being polite to people like Robert Hutchins? The man's a racist, a misogynist, and probably a dozen other things I find repulsive. But he controls commercial real estate throughout the financial district, so I smile and shake his hand and play the game. That's different. How? Because you chose this life. I got dragged into it. Victor laughed, sharp and bitter. You think I chose this? You think anyone chooses to be born into a world where every interaction is performance, where trust is currency and vulnerability is weakness? You could walk away. No, he cut her off. I couldn't. That's the point. Once you're in this world, there's no walking away. There's only managing it, controlling it, or being destroyed by it. The car stopped at a red light. In the silence, Lydia could hear her own breathing, too fast, too shallow. I'm sorry, she said finally, for screwing up tonight, for giving Catherine ammunition. Victor's expression softened slightly. You didn't screw up. You reacted like a normal person would. Unfortunately, we can't afford normal. How do you do it? Just turn off the parts of yourself that care? Practice, he said. Lots of practice. The light changed. The car moved forward, carrying them through the city that was Victor's kingdom and Lydia's cage. When they pulled up to her apartment building, Victor got out with her. You don't have to walk me up, Lydia said. I know. But he followed her anyway, up the 3 flights of stairs to her door with the multiple locks. Lydia unlocked them one by one, hyper-aware of Victor standing behind her. When she pushed the door open, she turned to find him studying her apartment with the same assessing gaze he used on everything. This is where you've been living? Yeah, it's not much, but pack a bag, he said abruptly. What? Pack a bag. Enough for a few weeks. He was already pulling out his phone. I'll send someone for the rest of your things tomorrow. Victor, what are you talking about? He looked up and Lydia saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Not anger, not calculation, something almost like concern. You're my wife, he said simply. You can't keep living in a building with broken locks in a neighborhood where I can hear gunshots from the street. It's not safe, and it's not convincing. I can't just move in with you. Why not? We're married. People are going to expect it. The contract said separate residences. The contract said separate residences were an option. It didn't mandate them. He pocketed his phone. Look, after tonight, Catherine's going to be spreading rumors. The best way to counter them is to present a united front, which means living together, at least for appearances. Lydia's head spun. This is happening too fast. This entire arrangement has been happening too fast, but we're committed now, so we adapt. His voice softened slightly. I have a penthouse in the financial district, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, security that actually works. You'll have your own space, your own privacy. We'll barely see each other except when required for public appearances. It made sense. Lydia hated that it made sense. What about my lease? I'll handle it. My things, I'll send a moving company tomorrow. Victor, this isn't a request, Lydia. After tonight, people are watching us more closely than ever. We need to sell this, actually sell it. That means living like a married couple, not like strangers playing pretend. Lydia looked at her apartment, the stained couch, the leaking bathroom, the careful poverty she'd constructed over years. Then she looked at Victor, standing in her doorway in his expensive tuxedo, offering her an escape she hadn't realized she wanted. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll pack a bag. Victor nodded once, stepping back into the hallway. I'll wait. Lydia moved through her apartment in a daze, throwing clothes into an overnight bag. Toiletries, phone charger, the few pieces of jewelry that actually meant something to her. She paused at her dresser, looking at the photo of her mother from before the accident, smiling and whole. You can bring pictures, Victor called from the doorway. Lydia grabbed the frame, added it to the bag. Thanks. 20 minutes later, they were back in the car, Lydia's meager belongings in a single bag at her feet. She watched her apartment building disappear in the side mirror, feeling like she was leaving behind more than just a place to sleep. The penthouse was in one of those buildings that didn't bother with signs. If you didn't know it was there, you didn't belong. They rode a private elevator to the top floor, Victor's keycard granting them access. The doors opened directly into his apartment. Calling it an apartment was like calling the Meridian a venue. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, the lights stretching to the horizon. Modern furniture that looked expensive because it was. Art on the walls that Lydia suspected was real. Kitchen equipment she wouldn't know how to use. Your room is down that hall, Victor said, pointing. Second door on the left. Bathroom attached. I've already had some basics stocked. Toiletries, that sort of thing. If you need anything else, just let me know. Lydia walked down the hall, her footsteps silent on hardwood that probably cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. The bedroom was bigger than her living room and kitchen combined. King-sized bed with hotel-quality linens. Closet that could fit her entire wardrobe 3 times over. Bathroom with a shower that had more settings than her car. Former car. She didn't have a car anymore, didn't have an apartment, didn't have a life outside of this arrangement. She sat down on the bed, so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud, and tried to process the past week. Wedding, contract, marriage, and now this, living in Victor Kane's penthouse like some kind of kept woman. A knock at the door. Victor stood in the hallway, still in his tuxedo, holding a glass of something amber. Thought you might need this, he said, offering the glass. Lydia took it, sipped. Whiskey, smooth and expensive. Thanks. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it. I'm at the other end of the hall, so we shouldn't get in each other's way. Very romantic. He almost smiled. I've had the locks changed to include your fingerprint. Security code is 0718. Memorize it. Why that number? It's random. That's the point. He leaned against the doorframe. Tomorrow we'll need to coordinate schedules. I have several events this week where I'll need you present. Okay. And Lydia? He waited until she looked up. Tonight wasn't your fault. Catherine's been looking for an opening since the wedding announcement. You just gave her a different one than she was expecting. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to be true. He straightened. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be busy. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Lydia finished the whiskey, changed into sleep clothes she'd packed without thinking, and climbed into the bed that felt like sleeping on money. She should sleep, should rest before whatever fresh nightmare tomorrow brought. Instead, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many decisions ago she could have stopped this. Whether there'd been a moment where she could have said no and meant it. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Saw you at the Meridian tonight. Very convincing performance. See Catherine. Of course. Another message. But we both know it's an act. Wonder how long before everyone else figures it out. Lydia deleted the messages, blocked the number, and buried her face in the pillow. Tomorrow. She'd deal with this tomorrow. Right now, she just wanted to sleep and pretend, for a few hours at least, that her life hadn't become completely unrecognizable. Outside the window, the city lights glittered like stars, beautiful and distant, and utterly indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in their shadow. Lydia closed her eyes and tried not to think about how far she'd fallen, or how much further she still had to go. Morning came with light that felt aggressive, pouring through windows Lydia had forgotten to cover. She woke disoriented, the ceiling unfamiliar, the mattress too soft, everything wrong until the previous night crashed back into memory. Victor's penthouse. She was living in Victor's penthouse now. Her phone said 7:30. Lydia dragged herself out of bed, found the bathroom, and stood under a shower with 8 different settings she didn't understand. The water pressure was perfect. The towels were the kind of soft that came from Egyptian cotton and professional laundering. Even the soap smelled expensive. She hated how much she didn't hate it. By the time she emerged, dressed in jeans and a sweater from her overnight bag, she could smell coffee. Following the scent led her to the kitchen, where Victor stood at the counter scrolling through his phone, a mug in his other hand. He looked up when she entered. Coffee's fresh. mugs in the cabinet above the machine. Thanks. Lydia poured herself a cup, added cream from a fridge that was twice the size of her old one. You're up early. Conference call with Singapore at 6. He set down his phone. There's food if you want it. I had my assistant stock the basics. Lydia opened the fridge. Basics apparently meant fresh fruit, yogurt, eggs, vegetables she'd never bought because they were too expensive. The freezer had actual steaks in it. This is too much, she said. It's groceries. Victor, you live here now. You need to eat. I'm not going to monitor what you consume. He refilled his coffee. There's a credit card for you on the counter. Household expenses, food, whatever you need. The PIN is the same as the security code. Lydia found the black card sitting next to a set of keys. Her name was embossed on it. Lydia Kane. She still wasn't used to seeing it. I have money, she said. From the arrangement. That's your money. This is for shared expenses. He checked his watch. I have a meeting at 9, another at 11. There's an event tonight, dinner with some business associates. Semi-formal. Margot's sending over options this afternoon. Another performance. Always. He grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. The moving company will be here around 2 to pack up your apartment. They'll bring everything here. Just tell them where you want it. You work fast. I work efficiently. There's a difference. He paused at the door. The security system has cameras in the common areas, living room, kitchen, hallways, none in the bedrooms or bathrooms. If that makes you uncomfortable, it's fine. Lydia wrapped her hands around her mug. I trust you. The words came out before she could stop them. Victor's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his face. You shouldn't, he said quietly, but I appreciate the sentiment. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click, leaving Lydia alone in a penthouse that cost more per month than she used to make in a year. She spent the morning exploring. Victor's home office was locked. The living room had books on the shelves, actual books, not decorative ones. History, philosophy, some fiction. One of the bedrooms had been converted into a gym with equipment Lydia wouldn't know how to use. Another was completely empty except for boxes in the corner, taped shut, and covered in dust. The main bedroom, Victor's bedroom, was at the end of the hall. Lydia stood outside for a long moment before trying the handle. Unlocked. She pushed the door open slowly, feeling like an intruder. The room was masculine and spare. King bed with dark sheets. Minimal furniture. One wall was all windows, the city sprawling below. No photos, no personal items except a watch on the nightstand and a book on the dresser, some dense historical text about post-war Europe. Lydia backed out, closing the door carefully. Whatever she'd been looking for, she hadn't found it. The movers arrived at 2 exactly, professional and efficient. Lydia gave them her old address, watched them load her entire life into boxes that fit in a single truck. By 4, everything was stacked in her new bedroom, looking pathetic against the expensive furniture. She was unpacking when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Lydia Kane, a woman's voice, sharp and professional. This is Jennifer Marks from the Metropolitan Register. I'm doing a piece on prominent city marriages, and I was hoping to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Victor. Lydia's stomach dropped. I'm not interested in giving interviews. Just a few questions. How you met, what attracted you to him, whether marriage has changed your perspective on... No comment. Lydia hung up, her hands shaking. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. She didn't answer. By the time Victor got home at 7, Lydia had received 11 calls from various reporters, 3 emails to an address she didn't know how they'd gotten, and 2 messages on social media from people claiming to be old friends she'd never heard of. They found me, she said when Victor walked in, still in his suit, looking tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Who found you? Reporters, journalists, random people wanting quotes about our marriage. She showed him her phone, the list of missed calls. How did they even get my number? Victor's jaw tightened. I'll handle it. How? By making it clear you're off limits. He loosened his tie, ran a hand through his hair. This is my fault. I should have anticipated this. What are you going to do? Threaten the entire media? If necessary. He said it like he meant it. Get dressed. We have dinner in an hour. Victor, I don't think I can do another event tonight. Not optional. These are people I've been cultivating for months. You don't show up. It sends the wrong message. Lydia wanted to argue, to say she was exhausted and overwhelmed and not equipped for this. But Victor was already walking away, pulling out his phone, making calls in a voice that suggested someone was about to have a very bad evening. She got dressed in one of Margot's selections, a black dress that was elegant without being flashy, fixed her makeup, stared at herself in the mirror and tried to find the person she'd been 2 weeks ago. That Lydia was gone. This one had a platinum ring and a black credit card and a bedroom in a penthouse overlooking the city. This one was married to Victor Kane. The dinner was at a restaurant that didn't have a sign, the kind of place where you needed a reservation 6 months in advance and knowing the right people to even find out it existed. Victor's hand was on her back as they entered, that familiar possessive touch that she was starting to recognize as armor. "Smile," he murmured. "These people eat weakness for breakfast." The private dining room held 8 people, all watching as Victor and Lydia entered. Older money, from the look of them. The kind of wealth that came with generations of careful cultivation. "Victor," a man at the head of the table said, standing. "Good to see you, and this must be your bride." "Marcus," Victor shook his hand. "This is Lydia. Lydia, Marcus Donnelly. He runs Donnelly Industries." Lydia knew the name. Donnelly Industries was one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in the country. Marcus Donnelly's net worth had commas in places that made her dizzy to think about. "Lovely to meet you," she said, shaking his hand. "Likewise. Please sit. We were just discussing the proposed infrastructure bill." What followed was 90 minutes of the most calculated conversation Lydia had ever witnessed. They talked about legislation and tax policy and international trade agreements, but underneath was a completely different conversation about power and influence, and who owed what to whom. Victor participated with the same cold precision he brought to everything, offering opinions that seemed neutral but clearly weren't. Lydia stayed quiet, eating food that probably cost more per bite than her old hourly wage, trying to track the subtext. "Your wife's very quiet," Marcus said at one point, his tone friendly but his eyes assessing. "Not much interest in policy, Lydia?" "More interested in listening," she said carefully. "I find you learn more when you're not the one talking." "Wise." Marcus smiled. "Victor, you've chosen well. Beauty and intelligence. Rare combination." The casual sexism should have made her angry. Instead, Lydia just felt tired. "She's both," Victor said, his hand finding hers on the table. "Among other things." The touch was light, his fingers barely brushing hers, but Lydia felt it like electricity. She glanced at him, found him looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he looked away, back to Marcus, and the moment was gone. After dinner, they stood outside while the valet retrieved their car. The night was cold, Lydia's breath fogging in the air. "You did well," Victor said. "I barely said anything." "Exactly. Marcus respects people who know when to stay quiet." He checked his phone, frowned. "There's a problem with a property acquisition in the industrial district. I need to handle it tonight." "Okay? You should go home. Get some rest." He looked up from his phone. "The driver will take you. What about you?" "I'll take a car from the office. Might be late." He paused. "Don't wait up." The driver took Lydia back to the penthouse. She let herself in, the security system beeping its recognition, and stood in the empty living room trying to figure out what to do with herself. It was barely 9. Back in her old life, she'd be finishing a catering shift right now, cleaning up, counting tips, heading home exhausted. Now she lived in a penthouse and had nothing to do. She tried watching TV, but everything felt trivial. Tried reading one of Victor's books, but couldn't concentrate. Eventually, she ended up in the kitchen, stress-baking cookies from ingredients she'd never usually buy. The cookies were cooling when her phone rang, her mother's facility again. "Hello? Miss Kane? It's Margaret. I hope I'm not calling too late." "No, it's fine. Is everything okay?" Everything's wonderful, actually. I wanted to let you know your mother had a great session today. The new equipment is really helping, and she's responding well to the increased therapy schedule." Lydia felt something loosen in her chest. "That's great, really great." "She was asking about you, wondering when you might visit." "Soon," Lydia promised. Things have been complicated." "Of course. Well, she's doing well. I thought you'd want to know." After they hung up, Lydia stood in the kitchen surrounded by the smell of fresh cookies, feeling tears build behind her eyes for reasons she couldn't articulate. Her mother was getting better. The debts were paid. She had money in the bank and a roof over her head and security she'd never had before. So why did she feel like she was drowning? The front door opened around midnight. Lydia was still awake, reading in the living room when Victor came in. He looked exhausted, his tie gone, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "You're still up," he said. "Couldn't sleep." She set down her book. "Everything okay with the property thing?" "Handled." He noticed the cookies on the counter. "You baked?" Stress response. "Feel free to eat them." Victor picked one up, took a bite. Something in his expression softened. "These are good." "Thanks." He ate another cookie, leaning against the counter, and for a moment they just stood there in comfortable silence. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, and whatever he saw made his jaw tighten. "What?" Lydia asked. "Nothing, just work." But he was still staring at the phone, his knuckles white where he gripped it. "Victor?" "Catherine gave an interview," he said abruptly, "to the Metropolitan Register, speculating about our marriage, suggesting it's a business arrangement, questioning your background." Lydia's stomach dropped. "When?" "Goes live tomorrow morning." He set down the phone. "My PR team is trying to kill it, but she's got connections. It might run anyway." "What do we do?" "We ignore it. Refusing to comment just makes us look guilty." His eyes met hers. "But there's going to be more scrutiny, more questions. People digging into your past, trying to find inconsistencies." "There's nothing to find. I'm exactly who I say I am." "That's the problem. You're too normal. People like Catherine can't accept that I'd marry someone without an agenda." "Maybe because you wouldn't," Lydia said quietly. "Maybe she's right to be suspicious." Victor didn't answer, just stood there looking at her with those dark eyes that gave nothing away. "I should sleep," Lydia said finally. "Long day tomorrow, probably." "Probably." But he didn't move as she walked past him, didn't say goodnight. Lydia paused at the hallway entrance. "Victor?" "Yeah?" "The cookies." "Help yourself. I made too many anyway." She went to bed without waiting for a response, closing the door on another day in a life that felt increasingly like someone else's. The article ran at 6 a.m. Lydia woke to 17 texts, 9 missed calls, and her social media accounts flooded with messages from people she'd never met. The headline was brutal: Kane's convenient wife inside the marriage that has everyone talking. The article was worse. Catherine had given quotes suggesting the marriage was transactional, that Lydia was an opportunist, that Victor was using her for some unclear purpose. There were photos from the Meridian Gala, analysis of their body language, interviews with anonymous sources claiming Lydia had worked as a waitress, not an event coordinator. Which was true, but the way they wrote it made it sound like a crime. Lydia was still reading, her coffee going cold, when Victor appeared in the kitchen already dressed for the day. "Don't read that garbage," he said. "Little late." "Lydia, they're calling me a gold digger, a con artist. Someone even suggested I might be blackmailing you." She looked up from her phone. "How do we fix this?" "We don't. We let it blow over." "That's not good enough. It's all we've got." Victor poured himself coffee, his movements controlled but tight. "Responding makes it a story. Ignoring it makes it gossip. And in the meantime, everyone thinks I'm some kind of opportunist who trapped you into marriage. Let them think what they want. Easy for you to say. They're not calling you names." Victor's phone rang. He checked it, silenced it. "I have meetings all day. Stay here. Don't answer the door. Don't talk to anyone claiming to be press. Don't engage on social media." "So I'm just supposed to hide?" "You're supposed to be smart." His voice was harder now. "This is what happens when you live in the public eye. People take shots. You learn to take the hit and keep moving." "I didn't sign up for this part." "Yes, you did. It's in the contract. Section 12, subsection C, public scrutiny and media management." He grabbed his jacket. "I'll have my team draft a statement, something neutral. In the meantime, keep your head down." He left, the door closing with more force than necessary. Lydia sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by expensive appliances and artisan coffee, and tried not to think about how every exit from this arrangement seemed to be closing one by one. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, her old coworker from the catering company. "Hey, saw the article. You okay?" At least someone was checking on her. "Been better." How are you? Working a wedding tonight. Could use an extra hand if you're free. Lydia stared at the message. A wedding. Back to her old life, even just for one night. Back to being invisible, unimportant, free. I can't. Sorry, no worries. Offer stands if things change. Things wouldn't change. That was the whole problem. The day crawled past. Lydia tried to distract herself with unpacking, organizing her belongings in a bedroom that still felt temporary. She called her mother's facility, got an update, listened to her mother ask when she could meet Lydia's new husband. Soon, Lydia lied. Things are just busy right now. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve someone who treats you well. Lydia hung up before the guilt could choke her. Around 3, the doorbell rang. Lydia checked the security camera, saw a delivery person with flowers. She almost didn't answer, but they looked legitimate. The bouquet was enormous. Roses, lilies, orchids in shades of white and cream. The card read, "Don't let them break you. V." Lydia stood in the entryway holding flowers that probably cost more than her first car, trying to decide if she wanted to laugh or cry. She settled for putting them in a vase and pretending the gesture didn't make her chest tight. Victor got home around 8, looking like he'd been through a war. He dropped his briefcase by the door, loosened his tie, and went straight for the whiskey. Bad day? Lydia asked from the couch. The article's making waves. Had 3 different business partners call to check in, which is code for asking if our marriage is legitimate. He drank, refilled. My PR team issued a statement. Bland, non-committal, exactly what we needed. And people are still talking. He sat down heavily on the opposite end of the couch. Catherine's doing a follow-up interview tomorrow, doubling down. Why does she hate me so much? I never did anything to her. You exist. That's enough. Victor stared into his glass. Catherine and I were together for 3 years. She wanted marriage. I didn't. When we ended, she took it personally. And now you're married to someone else within a year. I'd be pissed too. She's poison. Always has been. He looked at Lydia. The flowers. Did you get them? Yeah, thank you. They're beautiful. Good. They sat in silence, the weight of the day pressing down. Finally, Lydia said, How long does this part last? The scrutiny, the articles, people dissecting everything we do? Depends. A few weeks if we're lucky. Months if Catherine keeps feeding the story. He finished his whiskey. Eventually, something else will happen. Some other scandal. People will move on. And until then, we endure. Lydia thought about endurance, about the years she'd spent surviving on minimum wage and hope. This was different, harder in ways she hadn't expected. I need to visit my mother, she said abruptly. Soon, before this gets worse. Victor nodded. I'll arrange security. Security? If reporters are harassing you, they'll harass her too. Anyone connected to you becomes a target. His eyes found hers. I'm sorry. I should have thought of that sooner. It's not your fault. It's entirely my fault. I'm the one who dragged you into this. I could have said no. Could you? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to examine. Lydia's phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She rejected the call without looking. You should change your number, Victor said. Already did, twice. They keep finding it. I'll have it set you up with something more secure tomorrow. He stood, stretched. I'm going to bed. Early meeting tomorrow. Victor? He paused. The statement your PR team issued. What did it say? That our marriage is private, personal, and not subject to public commentary. That we're happy and ask for privacy during this time. His mouth twisted. All the usual lies that sound like truth. Right. Lydia pulled a blanket around herself. Good night. Good night. She listened to him walk down the hall, heard his door close. Then she sat alone in the living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and fresh flowers, wondering how many more lies she'd have to tell before this was over. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. Stop calling. Lydia? Not a reporter. Catherine. We should talk. I have nothing to say to you. I think you do. I think you're in over your head, playing a game you don't understand. Catherine's voice was smooth, almost sympathetic. Victor's using you. Whatever he promised, whatever he's paying, it's not worth it. You don't know what you're talking about. I know Victor. I know how he operates, and I know when someone's being manipulated. A pause. Meet me. Just one once. Let me explain what you're really dealing with. No. Lydia. I said no. Stop calling. Stop with the interviews. Just leave us alone. She hung up, blocked the number, and sat there shaking. Catherine was poison. Victor had said it, but poison worked by finding cracks, by seeping into the places that were already weak. And Lydia had plenty of cracks. She went to bed around 11, exhausted but unable to sleep. Lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the city outside, trying to remember what her life had been like before. Before Victor. Before the contract. Before she'd sold herself for money she desperately needed and was starting to realize might not be worth the price. Somewhere down the hall, behind a closed door, Victor was probably having the same thoughts. Or maybe not. Maybe he slept fine, unbothered by the chaos he'd created. Lydia rolled over, pulled the expensive sheets around herself, and tried to find comfort in a bed that still felt like someone else's. Tomorrow would be another performance, another day of smiling and pretending and being someone she wasn't. She was getting good at it. That was the part that scared her most. 3 weeks later, Victor announced they were going to Singapore. Business trip, he said over breakfast, not looking up from his tablet. 4 days? I need you there. Lydia set down her coffee. When? Friday. I'll have Margot coordinate your wardrobe. He scrolled through whatever he was reading. There's a gala Saturday night, dinner with potential investors Sunday. The rest is meetings you won't need to attend. So I'm just supposed to sit in a hotel room while you work? You're supposed to be visible when it matters and invisible when it doesn't. Finally, he looked at her. This is important, Lydia. These investors have traditional values. They'll want to meet my wife, see that I'm stable, settled, respectable. Exactly. She should have been used to it by now, being reduced to a prop in Victor's carefully constructed image. But 3 weeks of living together, of existing in parallel orbits that occasionally intersected, had made things complicated in ways the contract hadn't accounted for. They developed routines. Victor made coffee in the morning. Lydia cooked dinner most nights, partly because she enjoyed it, and partly because eating together felt less lonely than eating alone. They watched the news side by side on the couch, Victor commenting on political developments while Lydia tried to follow the threads of power he seemed to track instinctively. Sometimes his hand would brush hers, reaching for the remote. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her instead of the television. Sometimes the apartment felt less like a stage and more like a home. Those were the dangerous moments. Fine, Lydia said. Singapore. I'll be ready. The flight was 16 hours in a private jet that had bedrooms and a full bathroom and seats that converted into beds. Lydia tried not to think about how much it cost, tried not to calculate the obscene waste of resources. Victor worked for most of the flight, his laptop open, phone constantly buzzing with messages. Lydia read, slept, watched movies on a screen the size of her old TV. They barely spoke except when the flight attendant, yes, there was a flight attendant on the private jet, brought meals. You're quiet, Victor said somewhere over the Pacific. I'm tired. You've been tired for 3 weeks. Lydia looked at him. He'd closed his laptop, was watching her with that assessing gaze she still couldn't read. What do you want me to say? The truth would be novel. The truth, she laughed, sharp. The truth is I don't know who I am anymore. I live in your apartment, wear clothes you bought, attend events where I pretend to be someone I'm not. The truth is I'm exhausted from performing, from watching everything I say, from being judged by people who've decided I'm not good enough before I even open my mouth. Victor was quiet for a long moment, then, I know the feeling. Do you? You think I enjoy this? The constant scrutiny, the performance, being whoever the situation demands? He leaned back in his seat. I've been doing it so long I don't remember what it's like to be anything else. That's depressing. It's honest. His eyes found hers. Which you said you wanted. The flight attendant appeared with drinks neither of them had requested. They waited until she left before continuing. Why do you do it? Lydia asked. If you hate it so much, why not just walk away? Walk away to what? This is all I know, all I've ever known. Victor took a drink. My father started grooming me for this life when I was 6. By the time I was old enough to question whether I wanted it, I was already too deep to escape. Everyone has a choice. Do they? He tilted his head. You chose this arrangement, but did you really have a choice when the alternative was watching your mother suffer because you couldn't afford her care? The words landed like a punch. Lydia looked away, out the window at clouds that stretched forever. "That's different," she said quietly. "Is it?" They didn't speak for the rest of the flight. Singapore was humidity and glass towers and a hotel suite that probably cost more per night than Lydia used to make in a month. 2 bedrooms connected by a living area, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. "Rest," Victor said after they'd checked in. "The gala's tomorrow. I need you sharp." "I'm always sharp." "I know." Something flickered in his expression. "It's one of the things I—" He stopped, shook his head. "Get some sleep." He disappeared into his bedroom before Lydia could ask what he'd been about to say. The gala was at a hotel even more excessive than theirs, a ballroom that dripped with gold and crystal and orchids that probably cost thousands per arrangement. Lydia wore a dress Margot had selected, emerald green silk that moved like water, and felt every eye in the room track her entrance. Victor's hand was at her back, warm through the thin fabric. "Smile," he murmured. "You look terrified." "I am terrified." "Don't be. You've handled worse than this." Had she? Lydia wasn't sure anymore. The first few events had been overwhelming, but she'd survived them through sheer determination and the detachment that came from knowing none of it was real. But somewhere along the way, the lines had started blurring. "Victor Kane." A man approached, 60-ish, impeccably dressed. "I was hoping you'd make it." "Thomas." Victor shook his hand. "This is my wife, Lydia." "Lydia, Thomas Chen. He runs the largest shipping conglomerate in Southeast Asia." "Pleasure," Lydia said, offering her hand. Thomas took it, his grip firm but brief. "Your husband speaks highly of you." "Does he?" Lydia glanced at Victor. "That's news to me." Victor's mouth twitched. "Lydia keeps me humble." "A valuable quality." Thomas laughed. "My wife does the same. Come, let me introduce you to some people." What followed was hours of careful conversation, of reading between lines, of watching Victor navigate complex social dynamics with the same precision he brought to everything. Lydia played her role, charming but not too charming, intelligent but not threatening, present but not intrusive. She was getting too good at it. Around 11, they ended up on a terrace overlooking the city. The air was thick and warm, the skyline glittering like something from a postcard. "You're doing well," Victor said. "I'm exhausted." "I know, but you're not showing it. That's what matters." Lydia leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if you'd made different choices?" "Every day." "What would you change?" Victor was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I'd have been born to different parents in a different world. Somewhere I could have been normal." "You're not normal?" "Not even close." He moved to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Normal people don't build empires out of fear. They don't spend their lives calculating every interaction, weighing every relationship against its utility." "That sounds lonely." "It is." The honesty in his voice made Lydia turn to look at him. In the low light, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, handsome in a way that still made her breath catch. "Why me?" she asked. "For this arrangement. There must have been other options. Women who were already part of your world, who understood the rules." "Because you were real." His eyes met hers. "Everyone else in my life wants something. Power, money, access, whatever. But you? You needed help and you were honest about it. No games, no manipulation, just desperation and honesty." "That's why you chose me?" "Because I was desperate?" "Because you were real," he repeated. "Do you know how rare that is in my world?" Lydia didn't know what to say to that. They stood in silence, the party continuing behind them, the city sprawling below. "We should go back inside," Victor said finally. "People will talk if we're gone too long." "Let them talk." "Lydia, I'm tired of performing. Just for 5 minutes, can we just be people instead of whatever we're supposed to be?" Something shifted in Victor's expression. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, not the role she was playing. "Okay," he said quietly. 5 minutes. They stayed on the terrace, not talking, just existing in the same space without expectations or performance. And for those 5 minutes, Lydia let herself imagine what it would be like if this was real. If Victor had married her because he wanted to, not because it was convenient. If the touches and glances and rare moments of honesty meant something beyond the contract they'd signed. Then Victor's phone buzzed. He checked it, and the moment shattered. Thomas is looking for us. We should... Yeah. Lydia pushed away from the railing. Let's go. They went back inside, back to the performance, and Lydia tried not to think about how much harder it was getting to remember which parts were real. The next day, Victor had meetings. Lydia was supposed to stay in the hotel, out of sight and out of mind. Instead, she went exploring. Singapore was beautiful in a manufactured way. Clean streets, perfect parks, buildings that seemed designed to impress. Lydia wandered through gardens and markets, ate food from street vendors, and tried to remember what it felt like to be anonymous. Her phone rang around 3. Victor. Where are you? Out. Walking. Lydia, you're supposed to stay at the hotel. I'm not a prisoner, Victor, and you said I didn't need to attend meetings. Silence on the other end. Then, fine, but stay in public areas. Don't go anywhere isolated. Why? Because this city might look safe, but appearances are deceiving. Just be careful. He hung up before she could respond. Lydia kept walking, irritated by his concern and touched by it in equal measure. She ended up at the harbor, watching ships come and go, thinking about how easy it would be to just keep walking. Get on a boat or plane, disappear, start over somewhere Victor Kane's influence didn't reach. But she had a contract, and debts that were paid but could be reinstated if she broke the terms. And a mother who needed care Lydia couldn't provide on her own. She was trapped by her own choices. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Enjoying Singapore? See Catherine. Somehow she'd gotten Lydia's new number. Another message. Victor's there for more than business. Ask him about the Zhao family. Lydia stared at the messages, her mind racing. She should delete them, block the number, not engage with Catherine's poison. Instead, she typed, "What about the Zhao family?" The response came immediately. Ask your husband. If he's honest, which I doubt, he'll tell you they're the real reason for this trip. Everything else is theater. Lydia deleted the messages, but the damage was done. The question was lodged in her mind, growing roots. She went back to the hotel around 6. Victor was already there, on the phone, speaking in what sounded like Mandarin. He held up a finger when she entered, "Wait," and continued the conversation. Lydia went to her room, showered, tried to wash away the day's confusion. When she emerged, Victor was waiting in the living area with 2 glasses of wine. "You were gone for hours," he said, offering her a glass. "I told you I was walking." "For 6 hours? It's a big city." Victor studied her. "Something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong." "Lydia, who are the Zhao family?" The question landed like a bomb. Victor's expression went carefully neutral, which told Lydia everything she needed to know. "Where did you hear that name? Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters. Who told you about them?" "Catherine texted me. Said they're the real reason we're here." Lydia set down her wine. "Is that true?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to the window, looked out at the harbor. "Yes," he said, finally. "The Zayos are one of the most powerful families in Southeast Asia. They control shipping routes, have connections throughout the region. I've been trying to establish a partnership with them for 2 years. And our marriage factors into this how. They're traditional, conservative. They don't do business with people they don't trust, and they don't trust anyone who isn't settled. Married, stable." He turned to look at her. "Meeting you, seeing that I have a wife, it helps establish that credibility." "So I'm what? A character reference?" "You're part of the presentation." "Yes." Lydia laughed, bitter. "Everything really is business with you, isn't it? Even this trip, the gala, those 5 minutes on the terrace, all of it calculated." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Her voice rose. "What's fair about any of this? You brought me halfway around the world to help you close a business deal, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. I was protecting you. From what? Information? The ability to make informed decisions?" She grabbed her purse. "I need air." "Lydia, don't." But she was already out the door, heading for the elevator, needing to be anywhere but in that suite with Victor's carefully controlled lies. The hotel bar was on the top floor, all ambient lighting and expensive liquor. Lydia ordered something strong and sat alone, trying to calm down. She'd been naive. That was the problem. Somewhere in the past few weeks, she'd started believing that maybe this arrangement could become something more, that the moments of connection were real, that Victor saw her as more than a useful prop. She'd been so stupid. Bad night? Lydia looked up. A man in his 30s, attractive in an obvious way, was sitting 2 seats down. You could say that. Anything I can help with? Unless you can make men less manipulative, probably not. He laughed. Yeah, we're pretty terrible. I'm Alex, by the way. Lydia. They talked for an hour. Alex was American, in Singapore for work, staying at the hotel alone. He was funny and charming and uncomplicated in a way that felt like relief after weeks of Victor's calculated distance. Another drink? Alex offered. Lydia was about to say yes when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned and found Victor standing there, his expression absolutely neutral and therefore terrifying. There you are, he said, his voice pleasant and empty. I was worried. Victor? Lydia's heart kicked up. This is Alex. We were just talking. Alex. Victor offered his hand. Victor Kane, Lydia's husband. The word husband came out like a threat. Alex shook his hand, clearly picking up on the tension. Nice to meet you. I'll leave you two alone. He nodded at Lydia. Good talking to you. He left quickly. Lydia turned to Victor, ready for a fight, but he just stood there looking at her. We should go back to the room, he said quietly. I'm not ready. Please. The please surprised her. Lydia grabbed her purse and followed him to the elevator. They rode up in silence, the tension thick enough to choke on. Inside the suite, Victor went straight for the whiskey. I'm sorry, he said. Lydia blinked. What? For not telling you about the Zaus. For using you without explaining why. He drank. You're right. You deserve to know the full picture. Yeah, I do. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd refuse, that you'd realize how much of this is calculation and decide it wasn't worth it. He set down the glass. I need this deal, Lydia. The Zaus control access to markets I've been trying to break into for years. Without them, my expansion plans are dead in the water. So you used me. Yes. No hesitation, no excuse, just honesty. I used you, and I'd do it again because that's how this world works. You use the resources you have to get what you need. I'm not a resource. I'm a person. I know. His voice cracked slightly. That's the problem. Lydia stared at him. What's that supposed to mean? It means this was supposed to be simple. A business arrangement, clean and transactional. But you... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. You make dinner, and leave books on the couch, and stress-bake cookies at midnight. You ask questions no one else asks. You look at me like I'm human instead of some kind of monster. Victor, I'm breaking the rules, he said quietly. The ones I set. No emotional attachment, no crossing lines. But I don't know how to be around you without wanting things I have no right to want. The admission hung in the air between them. Lydia's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. What do you want? She asked. Victor looked at her, and for once his expression was completely unguarded, raw and honest and terrifying. I want to stop pretending, he said. I want those 5 minutes on the terrace to be real. I want to come home and have it feel like coming home, because you're there, not because it's where I sleep. He stepped closer. I want to stop counting the days until this arrangement ends and start hoping it doesn't. Lydia couldn't breathe. That's against the rules. I know. If we cross that line, everything changes. I know. They stood there inches apart, the weight of the contract and the rules and all the reasons this was a terrible idea pressing down. We can't, Lydia whispered. I know. But Victor's hand came up, cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. Lydia's eyes closed, her breath catching, every nerve ending alive. Tell me to stop, Victor said, his voice rough. I can't. His lips brushed hers. Tentative, asking permission. Lydia answered by closing the distance, kissing him with all the confusion and anger and longing she'd been suppressing for weeks. It was nothing like she'd imagined, not calculated or controlled, just desperate and honest and real. Victor's arms came around her, pulling her closer. Lydia's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on like she might drown without him. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, weeks of tension finding release. Then Victor pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. "We can't," he said, echoing her earlier words. "I know." "The contract." "I know." But neither of them moved. They stood there, tangled together, both knowing they'd just destroyed everything and neither willing to let go. "What do we do?" Lydia asked. "I don't know." Victor's hands were still on her waist, holding her like she might disappear. "I've never been here before." "Me neither." They stood like that for a long moment, the city glittering outside, the future they'd carefully constructed crumbling around them. Finally, Victor stepped back. His hands fell away, leaving Lydia cold. "You should go to bed," he said, his voice rough. "We have dinner with the Zhaos tomorrow. We need to be convincing." "Victor. Good night, Lydia." He walked to his room, closed the door, left her standing alone in the living area with the taste of him still on her lips. Lydia went to her own room, closed her own door, and sat on the edge of the bed trying to process what had just happened. They'd broken the rule. The one rule that mattered. No emotional attachment. And the worst part? Lydia couldn't bring herself to regret it. She pulled out her phone, looked at the contract James had drafted. Section 15, subsection A. Either party may terminate this agreement immediately upon evidence of emotional attachment that interferes with the professional nature of the arrangement. Professional nature. Like there was anything professional about living together, sharing meals, learning each other's patterns and preferences. Like there was anything professional about the way Victor had looked at her before he kissed her. Lydia set down the phone and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, they'd have dinner with the Zhao family. They'd perform being a happy married couple. They'd smile and touch and pretend everything was fine. And maybe, if they were good enough actors, they could pretend that kiss had never happened. But Lydia knew better. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. Morning came with the kind of silence that felt deliberate. Lydia woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover, her head pounding from too little sleep and too much whiskey. For a moment, she let herself pretend the previous night hadn't happened, that she and Victor hadn't crossed every line they'd sworn not to cross. Then she touched her lips and felt the memory of his kiss, and the pretending stopped. She found him in the living area, already dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, drinking coffee and reading something on his tablet. He looked up when she entered, and for a split second his expression was unguarded, raw. Then the walls came back up. "Coffee's fresh," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Thanks." Lydia poured herself a cup, added cream, tried to figure out how to exist in the same room with him after what had happened. The kiss had changed everything, made the air between them electric and dangerous. "About last night," Victor started. "We don't have to talk about it." "Yes, we do." He set down his tablet. "I crossed a line. I shouldn't have. It was unprofessional and inappropriate given the terms of our arrangement. Unprofessional. Inappropriate." The words landed like slaps, reducing what had felt real and desperate to a breach of contract. "Right," Lydia said flatly. "Unprofessional." "No, you're right. We have rules. We broke them. Won't happen again." She took her coffee and headed back to her room. "What time is dinner with the Zhaos?" 7. His voice followed her. "We leave at 6:30. Lydia closed her door without responding, pressed her back against it, and tried to breathe through the tightness in her chest. Unprofessional, like she was an employee who'd overstepped, not someone he'd kissed like he was drowning and she was air. She spent the day avoiding him, took her laptop to a coffee shop, answered emails she'd been putting off, called her mother's facility, and listened to Margaret talk about progress and therapy schedules. Normal things. Grounding things. Her mother came on the line toward the end of the call, her voice still a little slurred from the stroke, but getting stronger. "Lydia, sweetheart, when can I meet this husband of yours?" "Soon, Mom. He's just really busy with work." "Too busy for family?" Her mother's disapproval came through clearly. "That's not right. It's complicated. Marriage always is. But you make time for the people you love." A pause. "You do love him, don't you?" The question lodged in Lydia's throat. Did she love Victor? She barely knew him, except she knew how he took his coffee, how he ran his hand through his hair when he was frustrated, the way his expression softened when he thought she wasn't looking. She knew he hated crowds and carried guilt like armor, and had built walls so high he couldn't see over them anymore. She knew the taste of his lips and the desperate way he'd held her like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. "I don't know," Lydia said honestly. "I really don't know." By 6:15, she was dressed in something Margot had selected, a navy dress that was elegant without being flashy, expensive without screaming it. She emerged from her room to find Victor waiting, already wearing his mask of careful control. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look like you're about to negotiate a hostile takeover." "Same thing, really." The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu, where the waiters moved like dancers and the other diners spoke in hushed tones about things that affected millions of lives. The Zhao family was already seated when they arrived, 3 generations worth of power and influence compressed into one table. Mr. Zhao was in his 70s, sharp-eyed despite his age. His son, David, was maybe 40, polished and assessing. David's wife, Michelle, was gracious and watchful. Their teenage daughter picked at her phone, clearly bored. "Victor." Mr. Zhao stood, offering his hand. "Thank you for joining us." "The pleasure's mine. This is my wife, Lydia." Lydia shook hands, smiled, fell into the role she'd been playing for weeks. But underneath, she was hyper-aware of Victor beside her, of the way his hand rested on her back, possessive and careful. The dinner was a masterclass in subtext. They talked about Singapore's economy and regional politics and the shipping industry, but underneath was the real conversation about trust and partnership and whether Victor Kane was the kind of man the Zhaos wanted to do business with. "Your wife is quiet," Mr. Zhao observed at one point, his eyes on Lydia. "In my experience, that means she's either very wise or very bored." "Wise, I hope," Lydia said. Though the shipping regulations discussion was testing that theory, Mr. Zhao laughed, genuine and surprised. "Honest, too. Victor, you've chosen well." "I know," Victor said quietly, his hand finding Lydia's under the table. The touch was brief, just his fingers brushing hers, but she felt it everywhere. After dinner, Mr. Zhao invited them to walk through the restaurant's garden, a perfectly manicured space that probably required a team of gardeners to maintain. David and Michelle took their daughter home, leaving the 3 of them alone. "I've been watching you, Victor," Mr. Zhao said, his hands clasped behind his back. "For 2 years, ever since you first approached me about a partnership. Do you know what I saw?" "Ambition," Victor said. "Yes, but also isolation. A man building an empire alone, trusting no one, vulnerable because of it." He glanced at Lydia. "That changed when you married. Suddenly you had something to protect beyond your business interests." "Family changes your priorities," Victor said carefully. "It does. It also reveals character." Mr. Zhao stopped walking, turned to face them. "I've built my life on reading people, understanding what drives them. You, Victor, are driven by fear. Fear of failure, of vulnerability, of being seen as weak. But your wife," he looked at Lydia, "you're driven by something else. What is it?" The question caught her off guard. Lydia looked at Victor, saw him watching her, waiting. "Love," she said finally. "I'm driven by love. For my mother, for the people I care about. I'd do anything to protect them." "Even marry a man you barely knew?" The words hung in the air. Lydia felt Victor tense beside her. "Yes," she said quietly. "Even that." Mr. Zhao smiled. "Honesty. I appreciate that, Lydia. It's refreshing in a world full of calculated lies." He turned back to Victor. "I'll work with you. Not because I trust you. I don't. Not entirely. But because I trust her. And a man who marries for love instead of strategy is a man who understands what's worth protecting." Victor's hand found Lydia's again, held on tight. "Thank you." Don't thank me yet. My terms are strict, my expectations high. But if you can deliver what you've promised, this partnership will benefit us both." He nodded once. "My assistant will send the preliminary contracts tomorrow. Review them carefully." He left them alone in the garden, the city lights glittering beyond the manicured hedges. Lydia pulled her hand free from Victor's, feeling like she might shatter. "You did it," she said. "You got your deal." "We did it." "No." She turned to face him. "You did it. I just played my part, like always." "Lydia, he thinks we married for love, That I'm this noble influence who changed you, made you human, and it's all a lie. Her voice cracked. We're lying to everyone, including ourselves. Are we? The question stopped her cold. Victor stepped closer, his expression raw in a way she'd only seen once before. Last night, right before he'd kissed her. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. How to want something that wasn't part of the plan. How to care about someone in a way that makes me vulnerable. I've spent my entire life avoiding exactly this kind of complication. Then why did you kiss me? Because I couldn't not kiss you. His hands came up, framing her face. Because every rule I've lived by, every wall I've built, none of it works anymore. You walked into my life and broke everything I thought I knew about how this was supposed to work. Lydia's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. The contract says, I don't care what the contract says. His thumb brushed her cheek. I'm breaking the rules, Lydia. I've been breaking them for weeks, and I can't stop, even though I know I should. Victor? He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation. Just hunger and desperation and all the things they'd been holding back. Lydia kissed him back, her hands fisting in his jacket, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had stopped making sense. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. This ends badly, he said. I know. We should stop. Walk away before it gets worse. I know, but neither of them moved. They stood in the garden surrounded by imported plants and artificial perfection, holding on to something real for the first time in their carefully constructed arrangement. What do we do? Lydia whispered. I don't know. Victor's hands were still on her face, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. But I know I can't keep pretending this is just business. So what is it? He was quiet for a long moment, then, it's real. Whatever this is, it's real. They flew back to the city the next day, the 16-hour flight stretching like a prison sentence. They sat in different parts of the cabin, Victor working obsessively while Lydia pretended to read, both avoiding the conversation they needed to have. The penthouse felt different when they got back, like the walls had shifted, the space rearranged itself while they were gone. Or maybe it was just that everything between them had changed, making the familiar feel foreign. I need to review the Zhao contracts, Victor said, already pulling out his laptop. It'll probably take most of the night. Okay. But he didn't move, just stood there holding his laptop, looking at her like he was memorizing her face. Victor, I should work. He disappeared into his office before she could finish. Lydia stood alone in the living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and city views, and tried to figure out what came next. The contract was clear. Emotional attachment violated the terms. Either party could terminate immediately. Victor could end this, take back the money, make her life as difficult as he'd once promised. But he'd kissed her, twice. Told her it was real. So what did that mean? Her phone buzzed. Catherine somehow with her number again. Heard you closed the Zhao deal. Congratulations. Wonder how they'd feel knowing it's all an act. Lydia deleted the message, but Catherine's words lingered. An act. That's what it was supposed to be, what they'd both agreed to. Except somewhere between the contract signing and Singapore, the lines had blurred beyond recognition. She was cooking dinner when Victor emerged from his office hours later, looking exhausted. You're making pasta, he observed. You haven't eaten all day. How do you know that? Because I know you. You forget to eat when you're working. Something flickered in his expression. He sat at the kitchen island, watching her move around his kitchen like she belonged there, which she did now after weeks of cooking meals and leaving books on the couch and existing in his space. The contracts look good, he said. The Zayos are being fair considering. That's good. Yeah. They lapsed into silence. Lydia plated the pasta, set a dish in front of him, tried to pretend her hands weren't shaking. We need to talk, Victor said. I know. About Singapore, about what I said in the garden. Lydia sat across from him, her own pasta forgotten. Okay, let's talk. Victor set down his fork, met her eyes. I meant it, every word. This stopped being just business weeks ago, and I don't know how to go back. Maybe we don't go back. The contract, forget the contract. Lydia's voice was stronger than she felt. What do you want, Victor? Not what the contract says, not what's strategic or smart. What do you actually want? He looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, you. I want you. The admission hung between them, terrifying and honest. But, Lydia prompted because she could hear it in his voice, but I don't know how to do this. How to be in a relationship that isn't transactional. How to trust someone enough to let them in. His jaw clenched. My father used to say that love was a weapon people used against you, that caring about someone gave them power to destroy you. Your father sounds like he was miserable. He was. Powerful and feared and completely alone. He died that way. Victor's voice was flat. I swore I'd never be like him, but here I am, 34 years old, and I've never let anyone close enough to matter. Until you. Lydia reached across the island, took his hand. I'm terrified too. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to play a role, take the money, and walk away clean. But you... She swallowed hard. You make terrible coffee, and you work too much, and you're so convinced you're a monster that you can't see how hard you try to be good. And I'm falling for you, which is the stupidest thing I could possibly do. Victor's fingers tightened on hers. What do we do about the contract? We tear it up. Lydia, listen to me. She stood, moved around the island to face him. That contract was built on lies and desperation. It doesn't account for this. For us. So we tear it up and we start over. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But at least it'll be real. Victor pulled her closer, his hands settling on her waist. I could still hurt you. I'm good at hurting people, even when I don't mean to. I know. And I could hurt you too. That's how this works. She cupped his face, made him look at her. But I'd rather risk getting hurt with you than stay safe alone. He kissed her then, slow and deep, like he was memorizing the taste of her. Lydia kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it, all the fear and hope and desperate want she'd been carrying for weeks. When they broke apart, Victor's eyes were dark. My bedroom or yours? Does it matter? No, but I'm trying to be a gentleman. Lydia laughed, surprised. Little late for that. They ended up in his room, the city light streaming through uncovered windows, making everything feel surreal. Victor undressed her slowly, his hands shaking slightly, like he was afraid she might disappear. Lydia pulled him down to the bed, to her, needing to feel the solid weight of him. What happened next wasn't smooth or perfect. It was fumbling and desperate and real. Two people who'd been pretending for so long, they'd forgotten how to be honest. But it was theirs. No performance, no contract, just them. After they lay tangled together, Victor's head on her chest, her fingers running through his hair. I should call James tomorrow, he said quietly. Have him draft dissolution papers for the contract. And then what? And then we figure this out. No rules, no terms, just... He lifted his head to look at her. Whatever this is, you're really bad at uncertainty, aren't you? Terrible. He kissed her shoulder. But I'm trying. That's all I'm asking. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the contract forgotten and the future uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, neither of them was pretending. Morning brought reality crashing back. Victor's phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. with messages about the Zhao contracts. Lydia woke to an empty bed and the sound of him on a call in the other room, his voice sharp and focused. She found him in his office an hour later, still on the phone, surrounded by documents. He looked up when she entered, covered the receiver. Crisis with one of my properties. I need to handle this. Okay. There's coffee. I know where the coffee is, Victor. Go. Work. He hesitated, then nodded and went back to his call. Lydia closed the door, went to make breakfast, and tried not to feel the distance already creeping back in. The day stretched long. Victor was in his office until past noon, emerged looking stressed, made 3 more calls, disappeared again. Lydia cleaned the apartment, went for a walk, called her mother, and made plans to visit next week. By evening, she was starting to wonder if last night had been a mistake. If they'd moved too fast, broken too many rules, and now neither of them knew how to exist in the aftermath. She was making dinner when Victor finally emerged, looking exhausted. Sorry, he said. That took longer than expected. It's fine. It's not fine. I got caught up in work, and I didn't even check in. Victor, I know you have a job, a life. I'm not expecting you to drop everything just because we slept together. He flinched. Is that what you think last night was? I don't know what to think. You've barely looked at me all day. Because I'm trying to figure out how to do this. His voice rose slightly. I've never had to balance work and a relationship, and I'm clearly terrible at it. So what? You just shut down, disappear into your office, and hope I'll still be here when you come out? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, Victor. We broke every rule, destroyed a contract that was supposed to protect us both, and now we're supposed to just figure it out? Lydia set down the knife she'd been using. I need more than stolen moments and late-night confessions. I need to know this is real. It is real. Then prove it. The challenge hung in the air. Victor stared at her, his expression cycling through emotions too fast to track. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call. James, I need dissolution papers for the marriage contract, full termination, effective immediately. He paused, listening. No, everything's fine. Just do it. I'll sign tomorrow. Another pause. Because the contract doesn't matter anymore. Just draft the papers. He hung up, looked at Lydia. Real enough? It's a start. What else do you need? Honesty. No more walls, no more calculated distance. If this is going to work, I need all of you, not just the parts you think are acceptable. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then, my father died when I was 19. He had a heart attack in his office, alone because he'd pushed everyone away. I found him the next morning when he didn't show up for a meeting, and my first thought wasn't grief or sadness. It was relief that I'd finally be free of him. Lydia stepped closer, her anger fading in the face of his raw honesty. That's who I am, Victor continued. Someone who felt relief when his father died, who spent 15 years building the same kind of empire that killed him, who doesn't know how to love people without calculating the cost. That's not all you are. How do you know? Because you stress-eat cookies at midnight. Because you bought me flowers when the media was tearing me apart. Because you look at me sometimes like I'm the only real thing in your life. She took his hands. You're not your father, Victor. You're choosing differently. What if I can't? What if I hurt you the way he hurt everyone around him? Then you hurt me. And we deal with it, together. Victor pulled her close, buried his face in her neck. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. They stood like that for a long time, holding on to each other, trying to believe this could actually work. The next week was an adjustment. They signed the dissolution papers, officially ending the contract that had brought them together. Victor's lawyers looked confused but didn't ask questions. The money stayed in Lydia's account. No strings, no conditions, just hers. I don't want it back, Victor said when she tried to discuss it. That was part of our agreement. Consider it paid in full. For what? For putting up with me. For giving me a chance I didn't deserve. They told no one about the contract ending. As far as the world knew, they were still the married couple from the wedding announcement. But privately, everything had changed. Victor made time for dinner most nights, started asking about Lydia's day instead of disappearing into his office. Let her see the parts of himself he usually kept hidden. The doubt, the fear, the uncertainty he'd been trained to never show. Lydia took him to visit her mother at the care facility, watched him navigate the conversation with surprising gentleness, asking questions about her therapy, her progress, treating her like a person instead of an obligation. I like him, her mother said after Victor stepped out to take a call. He's intense, but you can tell he cares about you. How can you tell? The way he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're the only thing in the room that matters. Her mother squeezed Lydia's hand. That's how your father used to look at me. 2 weeks after Singapore, Catherine published another interview. This one was more vicious, claiming she had proof the marriage was a sham, that Victor had paid Lydia, that the whole thing was a business arrangement. She wasn't wrong. We should respond, Victor's PR team said during an emergency call. Counter the narrative, discredit her sources. No, Victor said. Everyone in the room stared at him. What do you mean, no? His head of PR asked. I mean, Catherine can say whatever she wants. Let her. He looked at Lydia. We know what's real. That's all that matters. The article made waves for a few days. Then a senator got caught in a scandal, and the news cycle moved on, as it always did. Catherine's accusations faded into background noise, just another piece of gossip in a city full of them. That's it? Lydia asked when it became clear no one cared anymore. That's it. Catherine's connections only go so far when there's no actual evidence. Victor pulled her closer on the couch where they were watching the news. Besides, even if she did have proof, I wouldn't care. I'm not hiding anymore. Not hiding what? The fact that I'm in love with my wife. The words were casual, thrown out like they weren't the most terrifying thing he could say. Lydia turned to stare at him. What? I'm in love with you. He said it again, clearer. Have been for weeks, probably. Just took me a while to admit it. Victor, you don't have to say it back. I know this is fast and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but I'm done pretending I don't feel things. I love you, Lydia. However messy and imperfect that is, it's true. Lydia kissed him, hard and desperate, trying to convey everything she couldn't put into words. When she pulled back, she was crying. I love you too, she said, which is insane because I barely know you, and this whole thing started as a lie, and we're probably going to destroy each other. Probably, Victor agreed, but at least we'll do it honestly. They got remarried 3 months later. Not for show, not for business, just for them. It was at the courthouse again, the same board clerk reading the same legal requirements. But this time when they said, I do, they meant it. The reception was small, just a few close friends. Lydia's mother, Marcus, from her old catering job. No reporters, no society pages, no performance, just people who actually mattered. I can't believe you pulled this off, her mother said during the dinner, watching Victor across the room talking to one of Lydia's friends. A few months ago, you were struggling to make rent, and now you're married to one of the most powerful men in the city. It's not about the money, Lydia said. I know. Her mother smiled. That's how I know it's real. That night, back at the penthouse that had finally started to feel like home, Victor pulled Lydia onto the balcony. The city stretched below them, glittering and indifferent. No regrets? He asked. About marrying you? A few? About loving you? None. I'll take it. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I was thinking maybe we should get you a proper office space. You've been talking about starting your own event planning business. I've been talking about it for years. Doesn't mean I'm ready. You're ready. You've just been scared, which is understandable given, he gestured vaguely at the city. Everything. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you try again. That's how this works. Lydia leaned back against him, thinking about all the ways her life had changed. The money had helped, yes. The debts being paid, her mother's care secured, the financial stability she'd never had. But that wasn't what had transformed her. It was learning that she could choose differently, that survival didn't have to mean settling, that fear didn't have to dictate every decision, that sometimes the riskiest choice was the right one. Okay, she said, let's do it. Office space, business plan, all of it. Yeah? Yeah, but I'm keeping my old catering contacts. They might be useful. Victor laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Always practical. One of us has to be. They stood on the balcony until the city lights started to blur, until exhaustion pulled them inside to a bed they actually shared now. No pretense of separate rooms or professional distance. 6 months later, Lydia's business was thriving. Small at first, a few weddings, some corporate events, but growing steadily. She hired Marcus as her first employee, brought on 2 more people within a month. Victor supported her in ways that surprised them both, not by throwing money at problems, but by actually listening, offering advice when asked, stepping back when not. Learning to be a partner instead of a benefactor. They fought sometimes, viciously, because neither of them had ever learned how to argue without trying to win. But they also learned how to apologize, how to admit when they were wrong, how to choose each other over pride. Catherine tried one more smear campaign, but by then, no one cared. Victor and Lydia's marriage was old news, and Catherine's vendetta looked increasingly pathetic. She texted me, Lydia told Victor one evening, showing him her phone. Said she hopes we're happy together. Think she means it? No, but I'll take it anyway. The Zhao partnership thrived. Victor's business expanded into Southeast Asian markets, the success everyone had predicted. But when asked about the deal, he always gave credit to Lydia. My wife closed it, he'd say. I just showed up. It wasn't true, but it wasn't entirely false either. They'd closed it together, performing a marriage that had somehow become real. A year after their first courthouse wedding, Victor came home with a small velvet box. We never did rings properly, he said, opening it to reveal a simple diamond band. The contract ones were, well, they were contract rings. I thought maybe you'd want something that actually meant something. Lydia looked at the ring, then at him. You're proposing? We're already married. I know, but we got married for the wrong reasons the first time. I wanted to give you the right ones. Which are? Because I love you. Because you make me want to be better than I am. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it. He took her hand. Lydia Kane, will you stay married to me? Not because of a contract or money or any practical reason, but just because you want to? She was crying before he finished. Yes. Obviously, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger next to the platinum band she still wore. Old and new, contract and choice, sitting together. Thank you, Victor said quietly. For what? For seeing past what I tried to be to who I actually am. For choosing me anyway. Always, Lydia said. I'll always choose you. They stood in their apartment, their home, surrounded by the life they'd built from lies and desperation and accidental honesty. It wasn't perfect. They still fought, still struggled, still had moments where the weight of their histories threatened to crush them. But it was real. And after everything they'd been through, all the performances and calculations and careful control, real was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 18 months after that first disastrous wedding where Victor had claimed her in front of hundreds of witnesses, Lydia stood in the same ballroom attending someone else's reception. Marcus was getting married, and she'd insisted on coordinating despite his protests. You don't have to work at your friend's wedding, he'd said. I want to. Besides, I'm not working. I'm supervising. Victor was her date, comfortable now in these social situations in a way he hadn't been before. He'd learned to relax slightly, to let his guard down around people who actually mattered. Remember this place? Lydia asked, watching couples dance across the same floor where Richard Arlington had grabbed her arm. How could I forget? It's where I made the worst decision of my life. Thanks. Also the best decision. He pulled her closer. Want to dance? You hate dancing. I hate a lot of things. Doesn't mean I won't do them for you. They moved on to the dance floor, and Lydia let herself sink into the moment. A year and a half ago, she'd been a struggling waitress, watching this world from the outside, invisible and desperate. Now she was part of it, not because she'd married into it, but because she'd chosen it, chosen him, chosen herself. What are you thinking about? Victor asked. How far we've come, how different everything is. Regret any of it? The beginning was rough, but the ending... She looked up at him. The ending's pretty good. We're not at the ending yet. No, but wherever we're heading, I'm glad we're heading there together. Victor kissed her then, in the middle of the dance floor, in front of everyone. Not for show, not for appearances, just because he wanted to. And when he pulled back, his smile was genuine and unguarded and entirely his own. Later, driving home through the city that had witnessed their transformation, Lydia thought about contracts and choices and the unpredictable nature of human connection. They'd started with rules designed to prevent exactly what had happened, two people falling for each other against all logic and reason. But love had never been logical, and the best things in life rarely followed the rules. She reached over, took Victor's hand, felt him squeeze back. I love you, she said. I know. I love you too. Simple words, honest words. The kind of truth that didn't need performance or packaging. Just two people who'd found each other in the chaos and decided to stay. And in a world built on transactions and careful calculations, that was the most revolutionary choice of all. To choose love. To choose honesty. To choose each other every single day, despite the risk and uncertainty and the 1,000 ways it could go wrong. They'd broken every rule. And in doing so, they'd found something worth keeping, something real, something theirs. And that was enough.